In popular culture, dopamine has been associated with drugs, alcohol, and pleasure. But in reality, it's much more than that. It's a big part of our unique human ability to think and plan. It helps us strive, focus, and find things interesting. The current pharmacology opinion on dopamine is that it dictates motivation salience. What does that mean, you might ask? Well, motivation salience is a cognitive process and a form of attention that motivates an individual's behavior towards or away from a particular object, perceived event, or outcome. So the next time you think of not going to a party and decide to rather curl up with a book on your bed, guess what? Your brain just squirted out some dopamine and that is making you stay home. Hey, my name is Rahul, and if you're new here, welcome to the channel, where I break down research papers and explain them in the most simplest way possible to you. If this is something that interests you, consider subscribing to the channel and make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. In this video, I'll be talking about how dopamine works and how can we keep that dopamine levels up so that we can get the best of ourselves through it. Let's go. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter. Our body makes it, and our nervous system uses this chemical to send messages between nerve cells. Despite decades of research, scientists are still baffled by the exact mechanism of dopamine in our brain. Most of the dopamine in the body is made in the midbrain, and from there it goes into different regions of the brain. The neurotransmitter dopamine spikes in our brain when we expect something important that's going to happen, and it plays an important role in the body's reward and motivation system, and can also affect memory. Dopamine is able to perform all these important functions, even though it consists of just 1% of the total brain neurons. In the right amounts, this neurotransmitter is crucial for brain function. But when this amount is lower than a particular point, it can have unintended consequences on the body. Dopamine deficiency has been linked to neurodegenerative disorders in humans. But before I talk about the effects of low levels of dopamine in the body, let me talk about the causes of low levels of dopamine in the body. The first on this list is sleep deprivation. So dopamine is the reason why you feel refreshed and alert in the mornings, other than the cup of coffee that we have had. The D2 receptors in our brain promote this wakefulness. These receptors help maintain the dopamine levels in our body. But depriving ourselves of sleep reduces the number of D2 receptors in our brain, which leads to lower production and transmission of dopamine. Second is drug and alcohol use. The use of hard drugs like cocaine lead to an increase in dopamine following its use, but then lead to a hard fall. So extensive use of these drugs lead to an imbalance of dopamine in the brain, which leads to reduction of dopamine receptors in our brain. And this is true even for pharmaceutical drugs and alcohol. Prescription medicine for ADHD and depression usually alleviate mood at first and then hook patients up who end up wanting more of it. Third on the list is obesity. Obesity is a disease. Yes, a disease. Just like someone craving for his next hit of his preferred drug, an obese person behaves the same way, but only with food. Research shows that their reward system works the same way as a drug user's does, and their brains contain lower amount of D2 receptors when compared to people who are not obese. Fourth on the list is junk foods. Corporations spend a lot of money researching their products and fine-tuning their recipes so that consumers keep coming back for more. Here, the main culprits are saturated fat and processed sugar. When you have a piece of fried chicken, a pizza, or chocolates, your brain naturally lights up with dopamine because this food is meant to do that. Unlike the caveman, we have engineered our food for consumption. This leads to short-term enjoyment, but in the long run, this pattern disrupts the region where dopamines are produced in the central nervous system, and this leads to a dopamine deficit in our brains. Number 5 is stress. Short-term stresses like what our ancestors would experience while they were running for their lives, or when someone pours cold water over your head, is good for your nervous system. But when there's constant stress being imposed on your body in small doses, the body's production of dopamine can be affected. Low levels of dopamine can have negative reactions in the body, and this leads to schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, and anhedonia. Anhedonia is when a person is not motivated to complete any task or lacks the motivation to engage in any kind of social interaction. And there are simple ways that we can treat this problem. Research has shown that certain parts of the brain are flushed with dopamine when we exercise. Having a sweat session is a very good way of maintaining the balance of chemicals in your brain. Eating foods like bananas, avocados, apples, and spinach are good ways to increase dopamine in your brain. Having a good gut health is also noted to increase dopamine levels in the brain. Probiotics are a good way to promote gut health. Listening to your favorite music also helps you alleviate mood and release dopamine in the brain. There is an old saying in Sanskrit which goes something like this: a person who knows music knows life. And science has proved that today, since dopamine is the motivator and music is the stimulator. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching and you have a good one.